Hello, welcome back to Planet 40k. Today is the Space Marine Day and we're going to be looking in the tactics for the secondary objectives that are within the chapter approved section of the Space Marine Codex. Now there's 3 secondary objectives within this codex, and very simply, in order to use them, the requirements are that the Warlord must have the Adeptus Astartes keyword, which I'm pretty sure he will do, and you can select one of these secondary objectives if you're playing an Eternal War mission. So these secondary objectives are located on page 113 of the Codex. Now of course in the chapter supplement books, they're going to each have their own unique secondary objectives to use, and you can actually use one from the Space Marine Codex and one from the supplement, then take one from the actual Grand Tournament 2021 book where all the generic secondaries are located. So let's begin with the first one, which is Codex Warfare. Now this is a Purge the Enemy secondary, which cannot be taken with other generic secondaries such as Assassination, because you can only take one Purge the Enemy secondary. So if you do take this one, it's an end game objective, and you score victory points by doing the following things. So there's 3 bullet points here. The first one is to score 1 victory point at the end of the battle to a maximum of 5 for each enemy unit that was destroyed as a result of an attack made by a heavy or grenade weapon by an Adeptus Astartes unit while in the Devastator Doctrine. The second one is to score 1 victory point, again maximum of 5, if you destroy a unit with rapid fire or assault weapons in the Tactical Doctrine, and then the third one is to score a victory point to a maximum of 5 if you're using a pistol or melee weapon in the Assault Doctrine. So I'm going to say this right from the off, this one is a really bad option to take if you're going to use this one, and I'll explain to you why. First of all, there must be at least 15 enemy units just to maximise this secondary, because each bullet point has a maximum of 5 victory points. So that's going to mean you need to kill 15 enemy units. So in smaller games, that's not even going to be a thing. If you're playing 1,000 points, for example, don't expect 15 enemy units within the battle. In the larger games perhaps, but not the smaller ones. The second point is you must kill at least 5 units per each doctrine, i.e. 5 in the Devastator Doctrine, because they're all maximised at 5. So you can't score say 3 in the Devastator Doctrine, but make up for it in the Tactical Doctrine because they're all capped at 5 to each bullet point. So that means you have to score 5 in every single bullet point. And then the third one, which is probably the most difficult of all of them, is you must use the correct weapon profile for each stage of the secondary, i.e. in the Devastator Doctrine you've got to use the heavy weapons. So this is going to require an extremely balanced list that's going to massively hinder your chapter playstyle in several ways. For example, if you're playing Blood Angels, do you want to be pumping a third of your points into heavy weapons and another third into rapid fire weapons when they're predominantly a melee based chapter? That's where you want to be putting all your points into all the melee based units, whether it's Assault Intercessors or Blade Guard Veterans, Assault Terminators for example. Do you really want to be taking some Devastators or some Eradicators? Maybe you do have a few in there, but in order to actually maximise that individual bullet point, you're going to need to get rid of 5 units. And then likewise, if you're playing Ultramarines or Ravenwing from the Dark Angels perhaps, you don't want to be investing too heavily in the assault weapons because they're both ranged chapters. And not only that, it's very easy to miss scoring points when you have turn restrictions in place. Your opponent will also know this and likely use whatever they can to deny unit kills with stratagems and whatnot. But if you were to take this and you did go for that balanced list, maybe that's your playstyle anyway, you're going to need to ensure that you're taking off 5 units in each given combat doctrine. So in terms of the Devastator Doctrine for example, that's only going to be turn 1, and as soon as turn 2 happens you literally cannot score any more points within that bullet point. Now the second and third bullet points are a little bit more flexible because you can have the Tactical Doctrine as turns 2 and even turn 3, and then the Assault Doctrine could be turn 4 and turn 5. So you've got 2 actual turns to score the other 2 bullet points, but the one that really hinders is the Devastator Doctrine in particular. You've only got that single turn, and if you've not got the range with your actual heavy weapons, it's going to be very difficult to actually kill units because of how far they're going to be when they're deployed. And again, your opponent is going to know this, so they're going to deploy very defensively just for turn 1, just so that you can't score the 5 points there. Now there are certain ways to manipulate the actual doctrines within the game. For example, Adaptive Strategy, which is a stratagem for 2 command points. As long as your warlord's on the battlefield, done in the command phase, you select a core unit, and for that particular unit, all the doctrines will be active for that battle round. But personally, I think that's too much of a command point sink. I would never really take this one. There's much better options in terms of the generic secondaries, and even if you did want to take the Purge the Enemy kind of secondary, there's Assassination as well, which is probably a bit easier. Now the second one is a Battlefield Supremacy secondary, which is called Shock Tactics. So you're scoring 3 victory points at the end of the battle round if you control 1 or more objective markers that were controlled by your opponent at the start of the battle round. And then your Adeptus Astartes unit has to of course stay in range of the objective marker. So you can't be taking this with Engage on All Fronts or Behind Enemy Lines or Stranglehold, because they're all Battlefield Supremacy secondaries and you can only take one of them. So this one does also have a few issues. It's not as bad as the Codex Warfare secondary secondary, but we'll go through some of the issues that you're going to find with this secondary. So the first one is turn 1, most of the objectives are going to be unscorable, especially if you're going first. A lot of the time your opponent is not going to be sat on the objective because you can't score in the first battle round for your primaries, so there's absolutely no need to be on them, especially if they see you having this secondary as your secondary objective. But then further to add to that, you're going to be out of range for most of the stuff. You're not going to be able to move and take over an objective that your opponent has. Then even if you go in second, you're not likely going to be taking objectives within the enemy deployment zone, as deep strikes and whatnot happen in turn 2, so you're going to completely miss turn 1 with your victory points there. And then it's very easy just to take your eyes off the primaries, as you need your enemy unit there to score. So if you're actually sitting on an objective scoring a primary, then you're not scoring your secondaries. So you can be caught in two minds here, whether you want to be sat on the objectives or let your opponent take the objectives and then you take it back from them to score shock tactics. Then the final point I put here, you need to do this in every battle round in order to max score it, because you're getting 3 per turn, and with 5 turns of course, that's 15 points. And as already mentioned, in turn 1 you're not likely to be scoring the points at all, so you've already dropped 3 points there. But the actual main issue, the fact that there's better options within the Battlefield Supremacy options within the Grand Tournament 2021 book. Now engaging all front is quite a firm favourite with a lot of players. It's so much more easier to get the points. Likewise with behind enemy lines and stranglehold as well. It's far more easy to get points than it is to do with shock tactics. Now if you were to take shock tactics, let's talk about the tactics. What would you actually do in order to maximise the points for this secondary? For me, you're going to need a drop pod, because if your opponent has made the mistake of sitting on an objective in terms of their deployment, and maybe they haven't screened it off that well, you can use a drop pod, and they can be used in turn 1 because of their drop pod assault rule, and they can be bringing a unit in turn 1. Now it will be 9 inches away, but again, depending on where they've actually deployed, you could actually sneak the objective just by deploying the drop pod in and disembarking your guys. But you can also make the charge move if you needed to, but it will be a 9-inch charge, which isn't of course that straightforward. But if you were to succeed with all the above, then you want to be doing it with a troop option, because they're going to have the troop objective secured ability. So I'm thinking about tactical marines in particular. They are troops, they've got objectives secured, so you can very easily steal an objective, of course once you've actually made the charge move, or you just got very lucky with the disembarkation and found yourself 3 inches away from an objective that your opponent has. Another way to do it, but not so much for turn 1, it's for the rest of the game. You could be using more of a forward thinking unit from the troop section, such as your assault intercessors. Again, they've got the objective secured ability, so they should very easily be able to steal an objective from your opponents, and they're going to want to be getting into melee anyway to trim the numbers of the opposing units guys, so that you're going to be holding the objectives there. But other than that, I'm probably not going to be taking this one either. I'd rather take engage on all fronts. Now we're on to the third one, which is a no mercy, no respite secondary, so it can't be paired with no prisoners or grind them down, or to the last. Now straight off the bat, I'm going to tell you this one isn't too bad. It's called Oaths of Movement. So there's 3 ways of scoring with Oaths of Movement. The first one, you score a victory point if any character, vehicle or monster was destroyed by an Adeptus Astartes unit during the battle round. The second, which is Oath of Honor, score 1 victory point at the end of the battle round, so long as no Adeptus Astartes units fell back or failed a morale test during that battle round. And Oath of Duty, which is score 2 victory points at the end of the battle round if an Adeptus Astartes unit is wholly within 6 inches of the centre of the battlefield. So there's some key strengths when taking this secondary. The first one is you can score up to 4 points in every battle round. And that's right from turn 1 you can be doing that, whether it's popping a vehicle, getting to the centre of the board and simply just not falling back. That's probably the easiest one to do, especially as a marine player. There's loads of ways to not fall back, and there's even the actual generic stratagem Insane Bravery for 2 command points, which will auto pass a morale test. So that one should be very easy to score in particular. And in fact, if you maximise the points and scored 4 points in every battle round, you're going to be getting 20 points. Now of course it's capped at 15, but it's going to leave you an entire 5 points as room for error. So if you fail to pop a character, a vehicle or a monster in 1 or 2 turns, it's okay. You've only dropped 2 points out of 20, you can still get the maximum of 15 without a problem. Then the last bullet point I put here is very strong for chapters that like to castle up in a location in the centre of the battlefield. Because the key part of the secondary is Oath of Duty for scoring 2 victory points by being wholly within 6 inches of the centre of the battlefield. Now it doesn't actually require you to be holding the objective, it just simply says to be wholly within 6 inches of the battlefield. You're probably likely going to be holding the objective if there is an objective in the centre. There may not even be one, it's just the centre of the board after all. But if there is a primary objective there, even better, that's a straight 5 points just for your primaries. Now one of the best ways to actually take this very early is to be using Infiltrators or Incursors, or any of the units that have got the concealed positions ability. Now I like Infiltrators personally because of that 12-inch deny range for deep striking units coming in from turn 2 onwards. But they're also troops, so they will gain the objective secured ability. Again, if there is an objective in the centre, there may not be. If there is, they're going to be holding that very firmly, as are their troops. But you can be deploying these guys straight in from the deployment section of the battle. So from turn 1 onwards, you're going to be there, and all they got to do is stick around. And then from turn 2 onwards, the rest of your army can very easily follow up, whether it's on foot or they're in vehicles and whatnot, to support this infiltrator unit. So as long as you're holding this part of the battlefield for the remainder of the game, just that alone will score you 10 points. Then if you're not falling back or failing morale, you can easily score another 5 there. And then the characters, vehicles and monsters, that's just a bonus to me. Just be a little bit careful for units that can fall back and shoot or fall back and charge. For example, Ultramarines with their Codex Discipline, they're eligible to fall back and still shoot. That will be classed as falling back. So the Oath of Volley bullet point, you'll actually have failed that one, so you won't be scoring that point if you do so. Now there's other chapters, of course, like White Scars for example, they can also fall back and do things. Just be a bit mindful that this will mess up one of those bullet points. And going back to the very first point, maybe there's not that many characters, maybe there's no vehicles, no monsters. It doesn't matter too much. As long as you're scoring the Oath of Honor and the Oath of Duties parts of this secondary, you should still be able to maximize no problem. Now in terms of the actual secondaries here that we spoke about today, I would never be using the Codex Warfare. Very difficult, very restricted. It's going to well and truly screw up your battle plans. No matter what chapter you play, it's not going to work out. Even if you had the most balanced list in the world, it's still going to be very difficult and very easy for your opponent to deny if you were doing that. The second one, Shock Tactics, I probably wouldn't do. It is more doable than the Codex Warfare because there's lots of decent troops within the Space Marine factions. Again, it's also chapter dependent. If you're playing Deathwing for example and you've got objective secure Terminators, this can become very easy to do, but that turn 1 in particular is a bit of a hindrance. You've only really got the option of a drop pod unless you're a very, very fast chapter that can steal points right from turn 1, but then you're relying on your opponent to actually have units sat on their objectives in the first place. Then the final one that we spoke about today, Oaths of Movement. If I was to take any of these, I'll definitely be taking that one. It just seems like easy points to me, and there's lots of different ways to play it, and even if you drop points, you can still maximize it quite comfortably. That's the 3 secondaries from the Space Marine Codex. Do you guys use any of these secondaries? Let me know your tactics and how you're scoring each one of these secondary objectives, and what chapter you play, just for reference as well. Before finishing up with the video, I just wanted to get the shout out of the day dealt with today, which is going to Ben Hayden for his comment relating to the Captain on a Bike review we did recently. He's just starting a White Scar Successor chapter, so this video has been really helpful, he says. Thank you very much for the comment, Ben. Keep them coming in. Let me know how you get on with your White Scar Successor chapter. So guys, that's the video today. Remember to like, comment and subscribe on your exits. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.